is our new unit over poverty. So this is gonna be a little sad, but hopefully it has some silver lining, just so you know a little more about how society plays into the whole poverty game, and just how the world views poverty, and just how societies differ from it. So these are just some of the sources I use to just look this up, and just to check all the information, that I had. So let's get into it. So obviously poverty, and I gotta move myself. Let's move myself right here for this podcast, or not podcast, video, whatever. So there was a question provided to people, and it was like, what qualifies as poverty in America for individuals? And so everyone kind of looked at it, and so it showed 4% for 35,000, and 12,000 is quarter, 54 is 21 and a half, 15 is, these are all people who think that poverty is these price, but the actual thing is 12,000. So if you look back, 25 people, or 25% of people got that right. So if you earn $12,000 a year as an individual, without like any kids, any like spouses, that's just you. That is 12,000. That's the poverty line. So if you make below 12,000, that means you are under the poverty line. So that means you are considered poor in America. Um, I think I'm going to be having to move myself a lot in this. But what qualifies as poor or poverty for a family of four? And so you can look at all these stats. So 35% think it's under 24,000, 17 believe it's 50,000, 34,000, 26, 22% think it's 20. And so let's see what it actually is. It's 24. So 24,000 if you have a family of four, and you're making less than that. That is the poverty line. So that means you qualify for certain government assistance programs and all of that good stuff. So 35%. So the majority of people got that right in this. So people are asking in this quiz, what is the average income? So 50, only 8%. 53 is 58%. No one thinks it's 70. And then 33% think it's 65,000. Average income, 53,000. So that is for an individual. So that is the average income in America. So every job put together. So like CEO of Microsoft and burger flipper at McDonald's. Put all of the jobs in between, put them together, it's 53,000 a year. So that is the average income. So there's that. And then some people ask, well, what's Texas's? And so I did some research. As of 2017, it's almost 60 grand. So we are above America. So we are doing better off as Texans. Um, so there is all that good stuff. So if you haven't seen this movie, this is a hilarious movie. So has Cuba Gooding Jr., all that good stuff. And so yeah, 59,000 for Texans. But what about our county? What about Dallas County? How many people? How much is the average income for Dallas County? Well, it's a little more than Texas, so we are a little better off than the rest of Texas. So 59, and then Dallas County is about 500, 600 more dollars a year. So that's kind of a good step. So if you're living in Dallas County, your likelihood of being above the national average and the state, in the state average are pretty good. So that's the average. But I couldn't find anything for Mesquite, Texas, so I did the neighboring Garland. Garland, however, is a little less than the and state and county average. It's only 55, but still that's pretty good. That's more than the average American. So we're still better off than the average American in Garland, Texas. So that's pretty good. And then let's look at child poverty. And I'm giving you all these stats just so you understand that it's like, okay, this is what poverty is before we get into the nitty gritty. And so, what percentage of children live in poverty? So, this would be y'all. So, is it 4% or is it 10, 21, 16, 25? And so, there's the varying differences. Sadly, it's 21%. 21% of kids live in poverty. So, these kids live needing assistance because their parents don't make enough money. And that's either this, that, or the other. And we'll get into those things later. And then what is the poverty rate for single mothers? So this is a big statistic because in America we have a parenting issue because who would have thought that having two parents would make a child more successful or having two parents would equal more income? Like who would have thought two people working is better than just one person working? Like I didn't think that. But Um, so with this, what's the single motherhood poverty rate? It's 40%. And again, that's sad that these single moms who are taking care of kids, um, if it's just one or if it's more than like three, that it's rough. 40% of women who are single mothers are under this poverty rate. They are considered poor. And so then what is the old people? How are old people living? Are they living in laps of luxury or not? And so this is a good indicator of like how we are doing as a society. If our older people, senior citizens who are retired, are they able to live in a better rate than others? And so the answers are 14%, 25, 37, 29. And so let's see. It's actually 14%. Sorry that the GIF didn't really work out, but bollocks. So only 14. So that is it. We wish that was zero, but I can live with 14, and we can help those 14% people out. And some people will say, well, that's because of Social Security or this or that, and we'll get into that. So this is the thing. So, what percentage of jobs in America do you think provide an annual income below the poverty line? So, this is like you have a job, you're not unemployed, you're working a job, and a they give you a salary that's below the poverty rate. So, these are mostly entry level jobs like fast food, like lower end of the scale, like your minimum wage jobs. Those are living under the poverty line. And if you are working, this is called the working poor. So these people are working, they're not like sitting on the side of the road as like people with no money. So it's 25% of jobs. And so this is a growing thing because things are getting more expensive. But hopefully, when we develop, we are able to have more money. And so this annual income. So you have a working poor. So these are people working for not a lot of money. And then, what percentage of children living in poverty do you think receive welfare from the government? So these are programs. This can be CHIP. This can be, CHIP is the Child Healthcare Insurance Policy. So if you do not qualify to get healthcare for your kids, the government will step in, help you out. kids on food stamps, free and reduced lunches. And so there's three answers: 47%, 27, 53, 21. And let's see what the survey said, or what, not the survey, but what the facts say. 27%. So it's not great. A quarter of children, so at a little bit above 1 in 4 kids are receiving welfare from the government. So this is free and reduced lunches. This is all of that. So it's kind of sad, but this is kind of sad, but you can see that we're trying to fix it, and we're going to talk about ways we can fix it, or at least ideas that are coming out. And then this is who had the highest poverty rate when it comes to ethnicities. And so is it white, Hispanic, black, or Asian? And we're going to bust that out. Blacks and Hispanics make up, out of their groups, a quarter of blacks are impoverished and a quarter of Hispanics are impoverished. And then if you look at whites and Asians, which these are like the major demographics, it's 10 and 12%. And so how do we get these people out of the poverty line? How do you get these people rich? And there is a question: what is the difference between being rich and being wealthy? So being rich is having a lot of money. Being wealthy is having a huge net gain. So this is how much you make after you count bills. Then there's being rich, which you have a lot of money, but you might spend a lot of money every month. So you're not saving money. So for instance, it's like if I'm making $1 million, that's a lot of money. That I would be rich. But if I only have so much money to spend on stuff like disposable income, and it's like $20, I'm rich, but I'm not wealthy. I can't really buy a whole lot because I'm spending it on normal things like food, housing, like bills. And so there's social stratification in the social class. And so stratification is looking at the income, what like wealth, power, prestige. This is ranking groups of people and their access to resources. For in, for instance, I don't have the access to gold. Like I just don't. Like I could call the infomercial, be like, "Hey, give me that Buffalo Gold coin," or whatever. But some people can be like, "Oh, well, I'm so rich. Get me a guy who gives me gold bars." How do we rank this? Can we how we look, and what is the prestige of the job? So a CEO, we see CEOs, those are the high people. Those are the Jeff Bezos and the Bill Gates of the world, or like just Henry Ford when he was around. These people are the rich people. And then we also see prestige with like, oh, the president gets a lot of money, obviously. And then if you look, it's like the president gets a lot of money and they are recognized for it. Or income, like how much do they make, wealth, how much can they spend, power. So there is a good quote from a TV show that it's like, oh yeah, like you can be the richest person in the world, but if you do not have the power to do something, then what is that money for? So, like being the president holds a lot of power because you have the largest economy in the world to back whatever you really want to do with the government. And so, compared to like compared to Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, which I'm just going to do a quick search here, like Jeff Bezos um, net worth is $117 billion. And then let's look at the GDP, the gross domestic product of countries. Like, who would he be compared to as a single person? And so he would be, he's not even in the top 10. I'm still trying to find. He has the same GDP as Slovakia. And Slovakia, that country you've heard of, that's super rich. It's like Kenya almost has more money um, than Jeff Bezos, and we don't view Slovakia and Kenya as rich countries. So again, that power, having that power is important as well as the wealth. And then there's social class, how we view people and how we share values, norms, identical lifestyles. So, for instance, it's like if you're driving a Lambo as your everyday car, you would think that man is upper class. Or if you see someone driving kind of a clunker, something that's not like, oh, that's not a nice car, that looks like it's a 15-year-old car that's been handed down from your uncle, you might think, well, maybe that's a lower class, or it's like if you don't have a car, or if you're driving a slightly used or a middle of the road like new car. Like for me, I would view myself as middle class because I drive a fairly new Kia Sportage. I have a good paying job. I can afford to go out every now and again. I can go to the movies. I can buy some new clothes like occasionally. I'm not hurting. So I would see myself as middle class. Or if you see someone, it's like, oh, I always eat out, and it's like, I'm not going to McDonald's every day. It's like I'm going to the nice restaurants. I'm going to the bougie restaurants. Like, oh, I'm going to go to the steakhouse every Thursday in downtown Dallas. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's like, or you're eating Texas Day Brazil, which is $50 a plate, like every week. That's expensive. So that would be maybe upper class. Or if you're just struggling to make ends meet, like where you barely go out, where you've never sat down at a restaurant and ordered from a menu, that would be lower class. So it's just identifiable lifestyles. And then we have income. So how much money you make over a so usually we view income by paycheck. So your monthly income, or what's your yearly income, what's your salary. And then wealth is like, hey, how can we get this net worth? Like that's like, so I own this phone. This would be part of my wealth. I can't really, there's a price tag with this, but it's more of the resources that I hold, not like, okay, well, here's my stack of cash. And then power. So making people go against what they believe in. So this would be like the government. They have a whole lot of power. They have the ability to make us stay in place, have our stuff like, hey, stay at home, to a degree. And for the most part, people are following that. And then it's like the power to tax. So, for instance, they have the power to take your money. And so, if you don't pay your taxes, and you don't pay it long enough and they finally kind of catch you because they're having to take care of like 33 million people, they'll throw you in a jail. And if you don't want to do that, they'll send in the police. And it's like they have a lot of power. Is there another thing here? Come on. So this is power. And so we view social class and social standings as like, oh, this is powerful. I have a lot of power. I can do this. And then there's false consequences. And so, or a false conscience. So the working class acceptance of capitalist ideas. So this is kind of this is like, do you believe it's true that people in higher social class have worked hard for what they have and those at the bottom haven't? And so that's a good question because people working construction, that's a hard job compared to creating an idea. Those are two different types of working hard. And so some people have this false of consciousness of, hey, if I work hard, I will be rich. And really it's more of not working hard, but working smart. So if you're working smart and developing something new, creating something new, you might have power. That's where I believe capitalism is kind of a thing. I don't believe that working hard will make you rich, but working smarter. Sometimes that is working hard. Or if you look at anything that Mark Cuban does, Mark Cuban says, like, hey, I didn't take a vacation for like 7 or 10 years. And then now he can take a vacation whenever he wants because he's a billionaire. He doesn't have to work anymore. But working hard doesn't always mean you're going to make money because, like, I work hard at my job every day and I'm not getting paid more than what I would be if I wasn't working as hard every day. So there is this false consciousness. Also, there's a class consciousness. So this is where we don't really have social classes that much because we're all intermingled, and how we're all intermingled, it doesn't really affect our things. But in other cultures, um, especially in India, you see they have had slash have the caste system where it's like, okay, this is my life, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Or even in communist China, it's like you take your tests and you file into you take your kind of test to see where you're going to fit into the cog of the machine of China. And it's like, okay, are you going to be like a farmer? Are you going to be working in the government? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a U.S. Olympian gymnastic person at the age of 8 or whatever? Like, you take these tests, and it's like they kind of put you in these places. And we don't really have this because we have this American dream where it's like, hey, I can be whatever I want to be. And the thing is, the American dream is alive and well. There's more people, like, there's more fluidity in the classes. There's more people going in and out of the top 1% every year than any other country. Usually you have people, it's like, oh, I just made my money. But it's like, I usually just inherited my money, or I'm rich, or I'm a royal, or something like that. And so, or it's like, I was born in the oil business. So it's like, oh, I can make all this money off of oil. So this is one of those things that you get to see. And so, like, this world, we all have different values. We all have different values in the world, and we all have different goals. And the thing is, America is very unique because we're not really based on ethnic. We're not a ethnic culture. We're an idea culture compared to like Mexico, or even like, for instance, Russia or China, where it's like, okay, we're ethnically this. It's like we're based on ideas. And so they have no idea. But then we have people um, living below the poverty line, and so that's 31 million. That's 11%. So again, that's 10%. So like around 1 in 10 of every people in America, if you just line them up, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Your poverty 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up your poverty 7, 8, 9, 10. It's just like every 1 in 10. And so this is living below our minimum level of consideration. And so that kind of moves a little bit like, what do we view as poverty? Because today you can still be poor and own a flat screen TV, which, say, back at the turn of the century in year 2000, if you had a flat screen, oh my gosh, like, or if you had the big tube screen TV that was like thick, deep, like it was like deep and big instead of just flat screen. It's like, oh, you're living fancy. But see, that changes over time. But the poverty line is something that the U.S. Bureau of the Census does, and this is just like, okay, what's the minimum annual income you can have to survive in America? And if you are below that, that's like, if you're below that, you're considered poor. And the thing is, if we're doing better as Americans, that might move up. Or if we're doing bad as Americans in a decade, we'll move down. And usually, like the official poverty line is every 10 years. So the census is like, okay, we'll do this. And so then social classes in the United States, let's look at that. And so there's the upper class, as Bernie Sanders says, the top 1%. He These are executives, celebrities, heirs. This is people earning $500,000 or more. These people are mostly Ivy League educated. So these are the like people who can go to the top colleges in the world, can go to this, can go to that. Then there's the upper middle class. So these people earn a six-figure salary. They're highly educated. Some people get their bachelor's degree, master's degree, even some doctorates. And they're very educated. Then there's the lower middle class. So from 35 to 75,000. They have some college or they have college. It's like these people are slightly educated. And then the working class. So these are people making between 16 and 30,000. And these are mostly like they have, for the most part, high school educated people. They aren't making, they're not going to college. And so even though I tell y'all that you don't need college to make a lot of money, and having a college degree does not make you a success or a failure, because there are a lot of people who have failed with college degrees and with doctorate's degrees. And yet there are billionaires who don't even have a college degree and barely have a high school diploma. So there are like it doesn't really matter, but sometimes it does. And for the most part, you have these Ivy League people, like for instance, Mark Zuckerberg went to an Ivy League school. And then you have people who have made their millions and billions elsewhere by just having an idea. So, like, I think Mark Cuban went to the University of Indiana, which is not a top level school, but he's a billionaire. He's highly educated because he has educated himself. But yeah, it's like you can do that, but education does. And then there's class inequalities. And so before I get into this, this is kind of me pulling the curtain back, showing you some education stuff. So in education classes, we learn like all these different kind of social thinkers, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is super important. And so these are kind of what you need to survive, kind of thing. So if you look, let's get this. If you look down here, these are basic needs. So like safety's a need, and then like psychological or physiology. So this is like your food, water, like shelter, all of that. And then you have your kind of, why is that doing that? Actually, I'm gonna change to purple. Um, this is like having friends, um, having this next level, your belonging of a society. This is where this class comes in. And then you have esteem. So, how do you feel about yourself, about accomplishing things, feeling accomplished? Your self esteem. And then your very top level is self fulfillment. And this is okay, I am I am achieving my potential. I am doing creative activities. I'm doing all this stuff. And the thing is, we can't really do this higher level of thinking if you're worried about food and water, where your next where your next meal is coming from. I can't teach you if you're worrying about the bottom stuff compared to the top stuff. Like I can't help you feel accomplished if you're hungry. And so it's kind of hard to do all this. And so the working poor, these people are like worrying about where their next food is compared to like, oh, I can't go to college because I'm barely making it as it is. And so that kind of creates this vicious cycle of you can never get out of this like cycle. But hopefully the government, as like a last resort, in my opinion, can come in and help. And so then there's the underclass. These people typically have some high school, but their household income is like 18,000, and they're unemployed and all this, and it's just like they're the underclass. Come on, where's there we go. And then there's absolute poverty. So this is the absence of any money. So these are people who don't have food or shelter. So that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they don't even have the necessities to life. And then there's relative poverty. So we view it's like, okay, so our poor, they're poor in our eyes. But if you look at someone from Nigeria or someone from like the Democratic Republic of the Congo or China, and you see those people in poverty, it's like, oh, the poor here are living it up because at least they have access to like food kitchens, all this stuff compared to, so it's like sometimes it's actually good to be poor in the United States compared to Nigeria, or like being rich in Nigeria might be okay, but it's not as good as being middle class in America. So this is just relativity. So how do we have this? And then we have the feminization of poverty. And this is a debated topic today, where um, you see people trend that women face more or are more likely to be poor than men. And the thing is, like, people say that there's the wage gap, and like they earn less, all this stuff. And part of that is true, but that's mainly because if you look at the lifetime, women have, for the most part, kids, and that takes a chunk out of their working career because they're taking care of kids. And part of that is because they lack childcare facilities, so they have to stay home while maybe husband works, or you're like left alone and you're having to, like, kids are raising kids essentially while mom is working because there's no dad in the picture and this. And so there is some truth to this poverty of is a woman's game, because mostly women in custody battles get the children over the father. And so when you're stuck with kids, like, I'm sorry, like, y'all are expensive. Like, it costs money to feed you, to clothe you, to send you to school, all that. It's like children are expensive. And so because of this, you have women losing money, and they are kind of labeled at this at risk of being poor. And so this is a interesting thing that we're trying to find out. Like, there is stuff that has um, there's stuff that has come up to make childcare free and readily available. And so there's horizontal mobility. So you can change occupation within the same class, social class. So for instance, I can be a teacher and be in the same social class and move over and be, like, let's say, a salesperson. I can be doing sales somewhere and make roughly amount. That's horizontal mobility. Like, I'm changing jobs, but nah. And then there's vertical, where you're changing between social classes. So you can be an upward. It's like you can go upwards or downwards. So if I became like if I was a teacher for so long and then I got nominated for the Department of Education, I get a whole lot more money, and my social class would change, obviously. Or if I became a influential teacher, moving up. Or if I was a principal and it's like, okay, like I ended up like doing something wrong and illegal and I'm on the news for it, and then it's like, oh, then I lose my job, I lose my credibility, and no one hires me as a principal or as a teacher. And then you go downwards. So it's an equal game. You can do stuff to go to be influential, then you can do stuff to get infamous, to be downgraded. And then there's intergenerational mobility, and this is kind of the thought of the American dream, where most people want their kids to have a better life than they do. And for the most part, people think that um, their kids are going to have a better life than they will. It's like, I hope that when I have kids, that they have a better life than I do. My parents want a better life for me. And it's just like, it's all this. So this is a change in status. And so sometimes it's a good mobility where it's like the next generation gets better off. Or if, say, you have like a Rockefeller or a Carnegie, and then they die off and their kids just squander the money and they just don't do anything, and they're like, oh, I'm just spending the money, and then they become poor overnight. And so you have that change. And so our last slide is social mobility. And so in a lot of cultures, there is a caste system. And it's not a good one. So in India, there's the caste system. In South Africa, there was the apartheid. And so this is um, this kind of assigned thing at birth. So depending on if you're like Hindu, you have the caste system. If you are like biological, or like any other reasons, like if you're black or white in South Africa, if you're black and white, it was like segregation of the classes. And so that's a caste system. So you have two different castes. Segregation here in America was kind of like was a caste, was an apartheid. And so you have all this going on. And some people say that the American justice system is this. And so this is kind of something that you would have to do research and then you can agree or disagree on. And then there's the open class system. This is what we hope that we have or we strive for here in America, where it's like, hey, if you're a great person, if you are working hard, you should be rewarded for your hard work, for your innovation. You should be honored for that. So there's all that. And this is just one of those things that it helps. And so there's a lot of things that have social mobility. I know if you are married, that helps you. Having kids randomly helps you. If you're still having a high school diploma helps you with social mobility. Like having these things, like not having kids before you're done with high school or your education is a good start, because like who thought that, like, oh no, having a kid while you're at school is not a good idea. It's like you will struggle because you're having to take care of a kid, like a little baby, and then you're having to go to classes. Like that's really rough. So there's ways to not be in that bottom area, and there's ways to be rich and powerful and all that. And I think our school is doing a good job by giving y'all the skill set to go into a growing tech area and growing. So this is social mobility and social injustice. You have an assignment on Google Classroom, so make sure you do that. And then if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll post my Google Voice number if you have questions. I have office hours. I'll post that too. So just let me know if you have any problems with the worksheet that you have with this. But hopefully with this, you can answer the worksheet more appropriately than not doing this. So hope you all have a great day. See ya.